Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about 3 of the instruments on your panel that don't need electricity, don't need a vacuum pump, and don't need the engine running at all. They run on nothing but air pressure. And those 3 are the ones telling you how high you are, whether you're climbing or descending, and how fast you're moving through the air. That's the Pitot-Static system. It's the simplest system in the airplane and one of the easiest to get fooled by, because when it goes wrong, the instruments don't go blank. They keep giving you confident, believable, yet wrong numbers. Today we'll be covering the whole thing: the system, the altimeter, how it works, how you set it, its errors, and the 5 different kinds of altitude. Then we'll cover the vertical speed indicator and then the airspeed indicator. We'll finish with what happens when something blocks a line and what you can do about it. The whole system exists to measure 2 pressures. The first is static pressure, the ambient pressure of the air the airplane is sitting in, undisturbed by the fact that you're moving through it. You collect it at a static port, a small opening mounted flush with the skin, deliberately flush, so that the air slides past instead of pushing in. On the 172, that's a little port low on the left side of the forward fuselage. If you cover it with a strip of tape or a coat of wax, you've disabled 3 instruments. The second is ram pressure, sometimes called impact or total pressure. That's static pressure plus the extra pressure of air being forced into a forward-facing tube as you fly. On the 172, the pitot tube hangs under the left wing, pointed into the relative wind. Behind the opening is a small drain hole, so moisture that gets in can get back out. Now the important part, and it's the part that makes every blockage question answerable. You have to understand that the altimeter and the vertical speed indicator are fed by static pressure only. The airspeed indicator is the only instrument fed by both, ram pressure on one side and static on the other. Learn those facts and the rest of this lesson mostly explains itself. The altimeter. Inside the altimeter is a stack of sealed aneroid wafers. These are thin metal discs with the air pumped out and sealed at standard pressure. That stack sits inside a case that's vented to the static port. Climb and the static pressure surrounding the wafer falls, so the wafers expand, descend, and the higher pressure squeezes them. A gear and linkage train converts that expansion and contraction into needle movements. In practice, your altimeter is an aneroid barometer with the dial marked in feet instead of inches of mercury. That's also why it doesn't measure your height. It measures pressure and then uses that to assume what altitude that pressure corresponds to. The sensitive altimeter in your 172 Papa uses 3 pointers. The long one reads hundreds, the short thick one reads thousands, and the small thin one with the triangle reads in tens of thousands. Most also show a cross-hatched warning segment that disappears above 10,000 feet. On the right side of the face is the Kollsman window, with the adjustment knob at the lower left. That window is where you tell the altimeter what the pressure is at sea level right now. A good rule of thumb is that 1 inch of mercury equals about 1,000 feet. Turn the setting up and the indicated altitude goes up with it. There's a regulation for this. It's 14 Code of Federal Regulations 91-121. Below 18,000 feet MSL, you set the current altimeter setting from a station within 100 nautical miles of your route. If you can't get one, use a departure airport elevation. At or above 18,000 feet, everyone sets 29.92 and flies flight levels off the same reference. So how do you check that the altimeter is working properly? On the ramp, dial in the current altimeter setting and look at what the needles say. They should show your field elevation within 75 feet. If the error is larger than that, the instrument belongs in a repair station. Altimeter calibration is a maintenance function, not a pilot function. Under 14 CFR 91-411, if you're going to fly IFR in controlled airspace, the altimeter, the static system, and the altitude reporting equipment must have been tested and inspected within the preceding 24 calendar months to standards set in Part 43 Appendix E. That test is where the shop puts the system on a bench, checks it for leaks, and verifies the readings against known pressures. Your job is to know that it's a 24 calendar month item and to know where to find it in the maintenance logs. There are 5 types of altitude that you need to know. First, indicated altitude, what the altimeter reads in the current setting set into the Kollsman window. Next, you have pressure altitude. Pressure altitude is what you read with 29.92 set into the Kollsman window. This feeds performance charts and it's the basis for the flight levels we previously mentioned. And then there's also absolute altitude. This is your actual height above the ground, so this is AGL. Pattern altitudes and obstacle clearances depend on this type of altitude. After absolute, we have density altitude. This is pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature. It's not a height, but it's an altitude that the airplane thinks that it's at and performs at. True altitude comes next. Actual height above mean sea level, and this is used for airport elevations, terrain, and obstacle clearances on the sectional. Now let's talk about some of the altimeter's errors. First, we have non-standard pressure. Your altimeter has no idea the weather changed, so let's say you set 30.15 in Tampa, and then you fly to an area where the pressure has fallen to 29.15, and if you don't correct your VAT, that's 1 inch of error. And if you recall, we mentioned that 1 inch of error is about 1,000 feet. The altimeter is now giving you a reading that is 1,000 feet higher than you actually are. Non-standard temperature. Cold air is dense, so pressure levels sit closer to the ground. If you fly into colder than standard air, the altimeter will overread again. Your true altitude is going to be lower than your indicated, roughly 4 feet per 1,000 feet of altitude for every degree Celsius below standard. Luckily, we have a memory aid for both of these. It goes high to low, hot to cold, look out below. Let's talk about mechanical error. So we have friction wear and hysteresis in the linkage. This is exactly what we checked for with that 75-foot pre-flight check. Lastly, we also have a block static port. We'll cover this in the next section. The vertical speed indicator, the VSI, is the same idea as the altimeter with one clever addition. Inside is a diaphragm connected directly to a static line, so it always sees your current outside pressure. That diaphragm sits inside of a sealed case, sealed except for one calibrated leak, a deliberately restricted passage. In level flight, pressures inside and outside of the diaphragm equalize and the needle rests on zero. Start a climb and the pressure inside the diaphragm drops right away, while the case pressure can only bleed down slowly through that restriction. The diaphragm contracts and the trapped higher pressure and needle shows a climb. Descend and it works in reverse. Because it depends on a leak, the VSI lags, typically 6 to 9 seconds to settle on an accurate rate. The VSI gives two separate indications: trend, shown by the first movement of the needle, and rate, which is only trustworthy once things stabilize. Use the trend to catch the deviation early and then confirm the rate. Don't chase the needle. The VSI isn't required in equipment under 91-205, but it's usually the instrument that tells you first that your static system is plugged. The airspeed indicator. The airspeed indicator is a differential pressure gauge, and it's the only instrument using both sources. Ram pressure from the pitot tube goes inside the diaphragm, while static pressure fills the case around it. The instrument measures the difference between them, and that difference is dynamic pressure, which is a direct function of how fast you're moving through the air. 4 airspeeds come out of this, plus ground speed. This can be remembered with the acronym ICE-TG. First, we have indicated airspeed, which is what's painted on the dial. Calibrated airspeed is indicated, corrected for installation and position errors. Largest at low airspeed and high angle of attack, which is why a Cessna 172 Papa near the stall shows an indicated speed noticeably lower than its calibrated one. Next, we have equivalent airspeed, which is calibrated airspeed corrected for compressibility. This matters in structural work and at high speed. At 172 speeds, it's essentially identical to calibrated airspeed. Next up, we have true airspeed. This is calibrated airspeed corrected for altitude and temperature. It's roughly 2% higher per 1,000 feet as a rule of thumb. Finally, we have ground speed, which is not an airspeed at all. It's true airspeed with wind added or subtracted. Here's where knowing which instrument uses which source pays off. Case 1. Pitot ram inlet block with the drain open. The ram pressure trapped in the line simply bleeds out the drain. With no pressure differential left, the airspeed indicator falls towards zero. The usual culprits are a pitot tube cover left on, or an insect nest built in the tube while the airplane sat. Case 2. Ram inlet and drain both blocked. The ice scenario. Now the pressure in the line is trapped. Static pressure still changes normally, so the airspeed indicator starts behaving like an altimeter. Climb, and the indicated airspeed increases. Descend, and it decreases. In level flight, it may look perfectly normal. This one is genuinely dangerous because a pilot watching airspeed climb during a climb will instinctively raise the nose to bring it back and fly it straight towards a stall. Case 3. Static port blocked with the pitot tube clear. The altimeter freezes at whatever altitude the blockage occurred. The VSI goes to zero and stays there. The airspeed indicator still moves, but it's wrong anywhere other than the blockage altitude. Climb above it and airspeed reads lower than actual. Descend below it and airspeed reads higher than actual. Notice a mirror image. A blocked pitot tube overreads in a climb, while a blocked static port underreads in a climb. Working around the errors. Prevent it on the ground. Cover off, look into the pitot tube opening, and check the drain. Visually inspect the static port. No tape, no wax, no ice, and no dirt. Then, on the takeoff roll, call airspeed alive. If it isn't, you still got runway ahead of you. Recognize it in the air. The Pitot-Static instruments are the ones that lie plausibly, so cross-check them against something you know that isn't in the system. Known pitch attitude plus known power setting equals known performance. If the airspeed indicator disagrees with the attitude indicator and the tachometer, believe pitch and power. Fix what you can. Suspected pitot ice? Pitot heat on, if your airplane has it. Suspected static blockage? Use the alternate static source. On 172 Papa, so equipped, a valve beneath the throttle on the left. Pull it and your static instruments can now breathe cabin air. Expect a jump when you do. Cabin pressure in flight is slightly lower than outside pressure, so with the alternate source selected, the altimeter reads slightly high. The airspeed indicator also reads slightly high, and the VSI momentarily indicates a climb before settling. The exact corrections are in the POH sections 3 and 5. If the airplane has no alternate source, the last resort technique is to break the glass on the VSI. It's the cheapest static instrument in the panel, and the broken case lets cabin air into the system to feed the altimeter and the airspeed indicator. Just know that the VSI itself will read backwards from that point on. Then, do the obvious thing. Tell ATC, get a heading and altitude if you need one, and land somewhere reasonable. An instrument problem is a nuisance. An instrument problem that you keep quiet while you chase a bad needle is an accident. In conclusion, static pressure feeds your altimeter and VSI, ram pressure through the pitot tube feeds the airspeed indicator along with static. The altimeter is a barometer that reads in feet. Set it correctly, check within 75 feet of field elevation, and remember that high to low, hot to cold means that you're lower than it says. Know your 5 altitudes. Trust the VSI's trend before its rate. And when a needle starts telling you a story that pitch and power don't support, don't argue with the airplane. Fly the attitude, get the heat or the alternate static source in, and sort it out with altitude underneath you. Fly safe, and we'll see you in the next lesson. To continue learning, make sure you follow us on all of our socials. And once again, thanks for watching.